Let's talk about the Sixers because pretty much one of the most common takes you would get around the league that is not directly related to the Damian Lillard or Drew Holiday trades in terms of like actually being a part of those moves. A lot of people are looking at how the Bucks and the Celtics dramatically improved their roster and then seeing the Sixers and going, well, looks like they're just done. Looks like they're pretty much a non-factor. The big move of their offseason was essentially landing Kelly Oubre, who I regret to inform you is not a very good basketball player, as attractive as he may be. And he's not going to help them much. So that's not ideal. Hello everybody, welcome to Austin Rusty Buckeye. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second. It makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you're watching my Spurs series, episode 7 will be out a little bit after this video goes up, so keep your eye out for that. It really helps if you just click on the video immediately. Makes it do better. All right. Now, as I previously discussed, there is actually a little bit of a silver lining to all this shit that's going on. Which is that they do potentially have a shitload of cap space for this upcoming offseason, and there are some solid free agents available, and if they manage to play their cards right, they could put a very, very good team around Joel Embiid just with a matter of a few signings. With that being said, that's not always necessarily something that players have patience for, and Joel Embiid recently put out a fairly cryptic tweet, which is in this thumbnail, talking about how fun of an offseason it was, when obviously from his point of view, that's decidedly not the case, and I am definitely willing to read into this one for Joel Embiid. Sometimes these tweets are not as cryptic as they may seem, but Joel Embiid is exactly the type of dude to let his feelings known through a sarcastic tweet, especially with the fact that I think his Twitter handle was like Troll, like Troll Embiid, which is very cringe, but whatever. So, you know, he's being pretty serious here, I guess. So I am concerned about the future of the Sixers and whether or not the process might just be over, whether or not Joel Embiid might ask out at some point during this season. I am going to be making a main channel video talking about superstars who could potentially be moving in the near future, but Joel Embiid definitely looks like he could be at the top of that list right now. And it really entirely is dependent on how willing he is to wait for this next coming season, because you gotta understand that Joel Embiid has finally eclipsed 30, and he is a very injury-prone player that probably doesn't necessarily have the longest career ahead of him. That kind of stuff really builds up over time, and while he has managed to be much more durable the past couple of years than he has been throughout his career before that, I imagine that's something that's just going to catch up to him when he's like 35, and he's not going to have like Chris Paul, LeBron James, Kevin Durant type longevity. So that said, the window for him being the best player on a championship team isn't that big, and as a result, wasting another season on a bad team isn't exactly ideal for that championship window. So I would not be surprised if he was rather not okay with the current circumstances. Now, obviously, he hasn't asked for a trade yet, and going into this season, he hasn't indicated directly that that's something that he is interested in. Perhaps he even has this long-term view as pitched to him by Daryl Morey. Here's the problem, though. That's not taking into account the mental toll that this next season could potentially take on Joel Embiid. I remember back in the season that they traded for James Harden, when Ben Simmons was sitting out for the year, that team was kind of depressing, and it was a Joel Embiid carry job through and through. Now, don't get me wrong, the Sixers were still a playoff team. They were still a pretty highly seeded playoff team, if I remember correctly, and I believe they were still on pace for 50 wins, but it was quite obvious to anyone watching them that this was not going to be a real, genuine championship contender. Joel Embiid can get his all he wants, Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris, and that's pretty much it. That's just not going to be enough. Obviously, they trade for James Harden. I believe they lost, is it the first or second round? I don't remember, in a weird fashion. Then they go back this year, they lose to the Celtics, and now James Harden doesn't want to be there. So they're kind of going right back to the team that you already were before that clearly was not good enough. So I do think there is a chance that Joel Embiid, by the time we're at the trade deadline, would feel like, man, fuck this. I don't know. Obviously, we can't read these players' minds. This is all just loose speculation, but I can say it wouldn't surprise me if that's exactly what happened. I mean, if you're taking a look at this roster from top to bottom, you know, people are talking about how thin the benches are for like the Bucks and the Celtics. So you would think that, like, okay, maybe these teams are better at the top. You know, Joel Embiid doesn't have anything comparable to a Damian Lillard as a sidekick, or I guess like Jrue Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, and Jaylen Brown, who are all on similar-ish footing. Jaylen Brown's definitely the best of the three, but not by like a holy shit margin. Like, he's not Damian Lillard good, is my point. But, you know, Tyrese Maxey's great. I think Tyrese Maxey can be really good. Tobias Harris is cool, but definitely should be your fourth option. You could argue that, like, okay, well, those teams are top heavy, so the way that you beat them is by having a deep team. But the Sixers don't have a deep team. I wouldn't have even considered them deep beforehand. Within this previous offseason, they replaced Georges Niang with Kelly Oubre, and I gotta say, Georges Niang is probably a better player, specifically because he's not going to take a bunch of dumbass shots and have complete tunnel vision and have no idea how to run an NBA offense like Kelly Oubre. This team didn't get better. They didn't get deeper. They're still a team that's kind of lacking in depth, while also not having an all-star level second option as they previously did. Yeah, this is kind of ugly. You know, maybe you could hypothesize that whatever you would get in a potential James Harden trade ends up actually yielding real players and guys who can help them win now and be a team that at least Joel Embiid doesn't hate being a part of. But first of all, again, you don't want to ruin that long-term view of this upcoming offseason. It's not that long-term, but you know what I mean. So you need to trade him for guys who are also on one-year deals, or at least if they are on a longer-term deal, it's something cheap. Because, like, I don't even know what like Norman Powell's contract is right now, but like, do you want to commit like $18 million to that guy when you could put it elsewhere in this next coming off season? Maybe however much money Terrence Mann is making. I don't know if that's, I should have looked this up probably, because obviously the Clippers are the destination that everyone's anticipating, and apparently James Harden specifically wants to go to the Clippers. Even though I gotta say, James, man, you have played your cards too many times here. You don't get to pick and choose where you're going right now. But, you know, the Clippers are a destination that makes sense and potentially could at least give them a couple of actual basketball players, but I don't know. It's disastrous. James Harden didn't show up to training camp, which isn't exactly shocking, but even if he did end up returning to this team and playing, it's gonna be pretty awkward and pretty ugly. We've seen James Harden play basketball on a team that he has made it clear he does not want to be on, when he was still with the Houston Rockets, when they had John Wall and Christian Wood for that very brief stint. And while I think he had that one game where he went the fuck off, otherwise just not really playing at what his best is, because he didn't have his heart in it. So the Sixers are kind of a disaster, and they're a team that you should be keeping a close eye on, because this upcoming season is not going to be all that pretty for them, and I would not be shocked whatsoever if that was a breaking point, if that was the breaking point for what has been a tumultuous and weird career in Philadelphia for Joel Embiid. It's also not an ideal environment to win an MVP. That's apparently really important to him, so keep that in mind. But yeah, shout out to Rudy for editing this video. RIP if you're a Sixers fan, and goodbye.